All right, well, it's been about 6 months since I made my quote-unquote final leader tier list, and I thought that I was done, but I reviewed my tier list over again, and I played a bunch of Civs both on and off stream, and I think that it's time to make at least a small semi-update and make a video on all of the thoughts on my leaders that I've changed since then. Now, the real question that we should be asking is the thumbnail for this video clickbait, and the video kind of yes and no. After hearing endless comments and thoughts and opinions on my previous videos on some specific Civs, not gonna name any names here, definitely not naming any names here, I went ahead and played a bunch of the more controversial Civs, more or less had a change of heart. Now, a reminder, this tier list and all my previous tier lists are made for single player deity on the Gathering Storm rule set, so things are going to be way different if you're playing on vanilla. Some of the beliefs and pantheons that I talk about and Civ abilities don't exist on vanilla. Additionally, some of the Civs are a lot crazier on lower difficulties. For example, vanilla China is probably one of the best Civs on lower difficulties, as you can literally get every single wonder. And Mongolia is incredible on multiplayer. So please keep this in mind as I'm talking about the thought process behind all of my changes. Now, this tier list isn't going to be a complete tier list. It's not going to be every single Civ talking about them ad nauseum for over an hour like I've done in my previous videos. This is just a mid-year update on if there's been any changes, if my thoughts and opinions have changed on some Civs, and we're only going to be going over rankings that have changed whole letter rankings, or at least a drastic percentage. Now, in this, there are only 8 Civs that have changed their respective rankings up or down a whole letter. But if you wanted to see the whole spreadsheet, if you wanted to look at this ranking right here, which is the older ranking, you can find the link to my Google Doc spreadsheet in the description above. Click on it and it'll bring it to you a read-only link that you can see. And you can also see the algorithm behind my rankings, so that maybe you can understand the discrepancies between how I rank each Civ a little bit better than just seeing flat letters A, B, C, D, etc. Now, the 8 Civs that I have changed whole letter rankings, or at least nearly full letter rankings, are Hammurabi of Babylon, Basil II of Byzantium, Coupe of the Maori, Vicky of England, Eleanor of Aquitaine, the French version, Rough Rider Teddy of America, Tamar of Georgia, and Cyrus of Persia. Now, the first one we're going to talk about here is obviously Babylon, and he's probably the most controversial leader in the entire Civ ranking, especially every single time I rank Babylon. It's just been 90% of the comments are about my rankings of Babylon. So when he was released, he was probably immediately locked in as the most overpowered Civ in the game, because people saw that he can just skip techs and research whatever he wants by unlocking a boost. The caveat in this is that his science is, literally halved, and it can take forever to research things. So he can still have some issues in regards to map position dependencies, resulting in that you just don't get eurekas that you need, and it can take you quite a long time to research a tech, specifically like a vital tech that you need. An example, and a really easy example that I make all the time, is astrology. If you're trying to get a religion as Babylon, if you're trying to do some faith religious stuff, there have been times where I have spawned on a continent without a natural wonder on the continent, or even nearby for me to research. Maybe there's Great Barrier Reef in the close to the continent, but not close enough for you to see it, so you can't boast it. So now you have 1.5 science per turn, and you have to research a 50 science tech. So you're not going to be getting the religion. You may get a religion, but it's going to take you a very long time. That's not to say you have to have a religion, but just in this example, you understand my reasoning. All of this to say, my mind has been changed pretty hard since I've been playing him recently, trying to do like sub 150 science wins, like sub 120 domination victories. That I am moving Babylon all the way up to A tier. He's not S tier, but he's just about there. If you do get locked in to those things that you need to boost, for example, astrology, or say you unlock bronze working and you can't unlock the swordsman tech because you have no iron around, it's really not that big of a deal. You're not locked into the science as much as you think you are. Even with your half science output, you'll be boosting through other techs fairly quickly enough that you can kind of ignore it, if that makes sense. If you go to war with people, take over a city or two, get some great scientists, eventually you get to the point with research alliances, The biggest one that you can do is build, this is, you say just build it, but I mean, getting Great Library is kind of a must with him. I would say kind of rush Great Library with Babylon, because later in the game you're going to be boosting so many things at once that the extra boosts that you get from the Great Library is just going to make you snowball like out of control. It's kind of crazy, honestly. The reason why he's still not S++ tier is because of those dependencies, right? You can still get hard stuck behind a tech, which causes you to miss things, which causes you to miss your timings. Now, more often than not, you're going to be able to get, you know, things like industrialization, things like apprenticeship, just because of how easy it is, right? Build 3 mines, build 2 workshops, and because of the fact when the first time you build the district, you get the building that you need. But it can cause you to miss some timings. You can spend like 30 plus turns researching a tech that would maybe taken you 7 to 8 turns with another civ. That is causing him to not be S tier. However, overall, I am moving Hammurabi into a very high A tier. He does allow you to do some crazy, really fast win shenanigans if you can cheese them out. But because of these dependencies, I don't know. I feel like it's a pretty fair assessment. Not S tier, like just about to be S tier. But because of the kit and because of how Civs game mechanics works, the 2 S tier Civs that I still have as the Kamai and Peter, I think put them above him just a tiny bit. Byzantium was another very, very controversial, very controversial leader that I ranked last time. A lot of people calling me an idiot for ranking him so low. And before I had him into B tier. That's where I also had Hammurabi as well. And I had him into B tier because of the same things as Hammurabi, the dependencies of getting a religion, and dependencies are a pretty big issue. But in the past 6 months, I've played a handful of Basil games, finished a full 6 to 7 games, and I've played around like 14 maybe non-full ones or so. And in that time, I've only missed a religion maybe twice, maybe 3 times. One of them was on stream, but, and this has been pointed out to me multiple times, and I've actually done it without getting a religion. Even if you miss your religion and you don't get Crusade, you can just kind of extend and delay your timings a little bit to wait for a religion to become your majority religion, and then you just use your holy sites to spread your religion. And you still get to use Taxis, and you still get to use your abilities and completely destroy other civs. Now, because of this, you can still do silly religious games where you could spread your religion without building holy sites or apostles. You'll see that in an upcoming holy siteless religious game that I do, that I played on stream a little bit ago. But because of that, I have moved Basil all the way up to A tier as well. This is another high A tier. You get some really early game strength with your great prophet points. The extra great prophet point you get early on allows you to get your religion faster. Tagmas come really quickly in Divine Right, because so by the time you're getting monarchy, you're going to be getting a really strong Tagma timing. Even without Tagmas, being able to use Taxis and spread your religion and get the full damage to cities is pretty insane. So Basil's very strong. The only thing that's holding him back is from being S tier is just he kind of has a linear victory path, right? His abilities only necessarily they don't allow you to only do domination and religion, but that's kind of the strength of focus, right? Whereas, you know, Peter, for example, can just do anything that he wants to. Now, Coupe is up next, and he doesn't necessarily change a full letter, but he moves enough that I think it's worth mentioning here. He might as well have. He moved all the way from a low B to a just under A. And I think I just severely underestimated how good Coupe is on single-player deity. Now, you can just be super giga cheesy and play on Terra map and, you know, go colonize the whole island yourself, or continent yourself. But taking that aside, the extra boosts and that you get to science, and you can just sit there and rack up your science before you settle a city, is honestly kind of insane. And it's a little cheesy how much you can snowball with Coupe by getting like basically an instant astrology by the time you settle. I bring up astrology because it's kind of the first like big boost that you get, right? Or big tech, quote unquote, that you can get pretty easily. You do get, you know, because of the delay, you can get a superior starting position. You get an extra pop, you get a builder. But the downfall is that, you know, there's a possibility that you spawn next to ice or snow and it takes you, 10 turns to find decent land. And because of this, there are also issues where there is less total land on the map because of how map generation works, and you spawn to a spot where you can only settle maybe like 2 cities away from 3 other civs. There are some other issues with Coupe, and his inability to harvest resources, which that does damper your immediate growth production output that you can get. That can also ruin some district setups, but it's kind of negligible. All in all, I felt that it was worth mentioning. Moving Coupe to B tier, it wasn't a full letter change, but I felt like it was enough, and enough to talk about the changes that, I don't know, I just thought I'd put them into this video. Now, to be honest, I really wasn't expecting Vicky to be even a person to put on this list. I've played her a few times this past few months, and honestly, she really surprised me of how much an industrial powerhouse she can be. Naval domination aside, even if you can't get naval dockyards in all your cities, right? Even if you're playing like a Pangaea map, you can still get at least 2 to 3 because of her starting bias. But let's just say you can't even get a naval dockyard. The extra production that you get from her kit is more than enough to make up for that, especially once you get to the mid game. You can get all of the extra military engineer charges, using those to build dams to get some crazy industrial zone adjacencies, all the extra production you get from strategic resources. It's just, I don't know, I felt Vicky was a little underserved from what I had mentioned last time, so I don't think there's honestly too much to talk about here. I was just kind of taken aback at how good of a civ they were from what I previously had thought. This was a low B, almost a C tier, but it's moving up to a high B. So this is kind of another, not changing a full letter ranking, but changing enough of a percentage that I felt it was worth talking about. So yeah, I don't know, maybe it was some of the biases that I had against, trying to play civs that have a specific map bias or map start, such as Portugal, Vicky, Norway, right? Like if you play Norway on an archipelago map, of course he's going to be way better than Cyrus, for example. Regardless, I moved Vicky into this section of the tier list because I thought it was worth mentioning. This is the second time that Ellie has moved on my list. Everyone go get Van Bradley because he's going to like this. The last time she had moved up, but this time she's honestly dropping back down, and while it's not too much, it is another full letter ranking to from a B tier to a high C tier. I don't know, man. For me, her lack of early game just kind of really seals the deal for me. Now, it's not to say that she isn't a strong civ. The early game abilities just really leave her very stagnant, very linear, right? You basically just get great works and play culture loyalty, and there's not much else you can do with that. There's really, that's what her whole kit is designed about. Now, that's not to say that isn't very strong, right? Once you get everything firing on all the cylinders, it works out really well. That's why in my rankings I have her strength of focus and synergy very high, but it just feels very blasé. And when you compare it to civs that can do things earlier than her and make them snowball a little bit better culturally wise, for example, Menelik is a really good example of this. It just, I don't know, it feels just not as strong as I had thought before. So not too much to talk about with Ellie. I think a C tier, I mean, this is average, right? C tier, B tier is average, especially when it comes to a curve scale. I don't know. That's where I have her. Now, another controversial civ, which I honestly was not expecting it to be, but the split persona of Rough Rider Teddy of America is moving up quite a bit. Now, it sounds a bit silly, but I was shown the light of Rough Rider while playing a peaceful Diplo game off stream, and I was just like, what the how is this so strong? How have I not played them this way before? It's kind of funny how there's so many different ways to play civs that if you don't play them the quote-unquote correct way to play them, you miss out on how fun they can be. Now, that sentence that I just said does not justify rankings, because people will just be like, well, in that case you need to play X, Y, and Z this way because you're just playing them wrong. Correlation does not imply causation. I said fun. I didn't say how incredibly strong they are. In this instance, playing Teddy their intended way showed how strong they can be if you lean heavily into Teddy's Diplo and Envoy strengths, if you pair them with abilities and mechanics of the game that amplify them. Now, other civs that if you play into their strengths can still be strong, but because of how the game mechanics are laid out, how some things, for example, such as like Monumentality, Golden Ages work out, make one civ stronger than the other. Pay attention to this because that is going to be applying to my next civ ranking, the same reasoning that I'm talking about now. All of this to say, Rough Rider is actually a B tier civ, surprisingly. I thought he was going to be a lot lower than this, but he moved all the way from a D tier high. Well, he went my first tier list was D tier. He went to a very low C tier. Now he's up to a B tier because I don't know. I think he's kind of very underrated. I'm really surprised by this. Probably the biggest jump in the ratings. Maybe second biggest jump, except for what's next. I believe in Tamar supremacy. I've been vocal, very vocal about my disappointment in Georgia, especially with the quote-unquote buffs that they had received during the final patch of Civilization 6. I have consistently ranked Tamar at the bottom of the barrel. I've constantly trashed on them and said that their abilities really don't matter. And while I don't think they are S tier or even A tier or anything, I think they deserve a bit more praise and recognition than that. If you are playing Tamar, or if you're planning on playing Tamar, I would highly suggest trying to get a religion with her and going, now, I'm not saying do this every time, but maybe get something like work ethic and then go into papal primacy with her. Then for the first half of the game, I would highly suggest running Diplomatic League, which is a policy card that for the first envoy you send, that counts as 2 envoys to a city-state. And then send scouts everywhere on the map. Now, the amount of first meet suzerains you're going to get is probably going to blow you away because, so you first meet a city-state, you have Diplo League in, so that sends 2 envoys to that city-state if you first meet them. And then because of papal primacy, you're spreading your religion to them, which now sends another envoy to them, which gets you the first time suzerain. And if you can do that over and over again, you kind of get an insane amount of envoys. And if you are playing with the Secret Societies game mode and you run Owls of Minerva and you are running Heroes and Legends and you have Hamiko, then you can just trade with every city-state, constantly get envoys. It just snowballs insanely hard. I have a video of where I'm playing this. I'm playing this on stream currently right now, so that video will be coming up in the next coming week or so. Friend of the channel, Sarge, you guys may know him as 100 Games, 100 Days. He has been a Tamar believer since day one, even before the so-called buffs that had happened. So if anyone deserves recognition on Tamar, it's him. He has been preaching the Church of Tamar since forever. But with that, Tamar is not D tier. Honestly, Tamar is almost C tier. The reason why she's not B tier is because she doesn't really focus on one type of victory condition or another. She's kind of like Pound Maker, where she gets a lot of boosts and a lot of buffs to generic things. You know, you get the early faith, which allows you to get the Pantheon if you can kill barbarians close to you. If you can't, I mean, obviously you'll find out in the game that I'm playing, I actually don't get like any barbarian kills except for 1, which gives me 2 faith. So, you know, it can be a crapshoot. All in all, Tamar, I think she's in a high C tier, low B tier. I'm keeping her in C right now. We believe in you, Tamar. Tamar supremacy. And the final one on the list, which is, it may not surprise a lot of people. I think it's just surprised me with how far Cyrus has fallen. As we're going with Cyrus of Persia. Now, I did play him. You guys saw the video of my tile improvement only tourism game. And during that game, I was like, Cyrus feels kind of off. I don't know if it's only because I'm playing tile improvement only or what. So I decided to try a few more games off stream. And my thoughts were kind of justified. He's not god awful, but with all the nerfs that had happened to Cyrus, right? His Paradise got nerfed. There was a secret nerf with Earth Goddess getting nerfed. And I think there was another secret nerf that people don't really talk about a lot. And this happens with a lot of early game melee units, is with the addition of men-at-arms as well as like line infantry and trebuchets and things like that. Immortals really aren't as strong as I know that they adjusted the strength, they adjusted the combat strength of these, you know, to make up for it. But I feel like with how fast men-at-arms come, Immortals fall off way harder than they did before. And because of that, it just doesn't feel like Persia doesn't snowball as hard as, say, a Greece does. Cyrus is now still B tier, but he's kind of a low B tier here, roughly riding the C tier border. I think that there are just some civs that do better than Cyrus. The Ottoman Empire is a good example. Germany can do better than Cyrus, even though they don't have an early game unit. Philip is, I think, a better Cyrus. Internals are still really strong with him. But like I said, I think Philip does it better than Cyrus now. I don't know. I just think there have been too many nerfs to things that were outside of Persia's control that caused them to drop a little bit further. So yeah. All right. That's the total amount of civs that I have fully changed in regards to rankings. I moved a couple of them up and down tiers. Most of them are up and down full letters. Some of them are only within their own tier system. The big ones are obviously Byzantium and Babylon. It almost seems like I'm just like pandering to comments by being like, see, look, I ranked them up. Big number, go burr. But really, they are just very, very strong. It's not that I misunderstood them before. I just think I didn't play them enough, and I kind of just wrote them off. I'm like, okay, yeah, they can be cheesy, but they you know, cheese doesn't necessarily mean S tier or greatness. But I think cheese aside, they can still be really strong civs. And because of that, I think this is a really good idea. I like the idea of doing these half-year updates, right? Instead of just doing a full All right, this is the final tier list. This is it. You cannot change. There's no ups and downs. Nothing else is going to change. Because they are, you know, your opinions are going to change, right? The more you get comfortable with a civ, the more you play it on different maps. There's so many variables that you can add to Civilization 6 that it kind of makes it really hard to have one civ stagnant or static over the other, especially with the amount of mods that have been coming out lately, some of the map scripting that's been coming out lately. If you guys haven't watched yet, I would highly suggest watching the Got Lakes or playing with the Got Lakes map scripting. It's one of the most innovative ones in the game. Ursa Ryan has been playing it a ton, so I would just highly suggest playing it. There aren't a ton of up and down changes on this list, like I had said, but I felt that the changes were big enough to show in this video, and I'll probably do another one at the end of this year, and maybe continue to do so until Civilization 7 is released. Copium. All in all, what are all of your thoughts on this? Please let me know in the comments below. If you haven't seen my previous rankings, I would highly suggest going to go watch them. You can find those by clicking the link on the screen. I believe it's up here on the top right. Oh, I did also forget to add 2 civs to this list. Nubia and Poland. Nubia went from D tier to C tier, and Poland went from C tier to D tier. Nubia is definitely stronger than I had thought previously. Their archers are really good, and they have really great early growth and faith from their pyramids, so it allows them to snowball a little early. Additionally, for Poland, I mean, outside of their relic play that you can do, there really just isn't anything else that makes them unique or remarkable. Winged Hussars, even with the previous buff that they got, are still just a shell of themselves. The culture bomb religion aspect is so situational that I'd rather just use apostles than try and, you know, strategically culture bomb things. I'm just gonna go ahead and leave this here. I forgot to mention them. I'm gonna leave the full tier list, the new updated tier list, up so you can look at it here. I'll leave it throughout the rest of my speaking. So there you go. Sorry. Anyways, here's me doing the outro. Anyways, that's gonna about do it for me here. So if you enjoyed this, please let me know. I hope you guys all did. It's nice to be back making videos. Even the short little tier list video is a kind of a breath of fresh air for me. So thank you to all of my Patreon supporters and all of my YouTube members. I love you all. Thank you very much for supporting me, and I will see you in the next one. Bye-bye. Bye. 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 Bye.